I want to tell you about the radio. The Kozlowskis radio, an RCA from before the war, a large floor-standing model in a walnut cabinet with a fabric-covered speaker and amber dial light, was in the corner of the living room opposite the television. It had not been removed when the television arrived. It had simply been displaced. Moved slightly, angled away from the center of the room, no longer the thing you faced when you sat down. It was still present. It still worked. It had simply been demoted in the furniture hierarchy, from the thing the room was organized around to the thing in the corner that we hadn't gotten to dealing with yet. I found myself looking at it during the evening. Not in a sentimental way. I am not sentimental about furniture, but with the awareness that the radio in the corner represented something. An entire era of listening, of a relationship between people and the media they consumed that was organized around sound alone, that required the imagination to supply the image. The radio drama, the radio comedy, the radio news broadcast, all of it dependent on the listener's willingness to construct a visual world from audio cues, to populate the story with the faces and spaces that the radio suggested but did not provide. I grew up with radio. My parents had one of the first in our neighborhood. I remember the specific quality of attention that radio required, how you leaned toward it, how you became slightly more still, how a part of your mind was continuously engaged in the construction of the visual correlate of what you heard. Now, the television in the center, providing the images pre-made. The radio in the corner, its amber light unlit, its speaker waiting. I wonder now, sitting at this table with my coffee, what happens to the imagination when the images start arriving pre-made? Not whether it atrophies. I am not ready to draw that conclusion yet. But what happens to the specific imaginative exercise of building the visual from the audio? Where that energy goes when it is no longer needed for this purpose? Whether it finds another purpose? Whether it is simply released? I don't know the answer, but I know the question. And I know that the radio in the corner of the Kozlowskis' living room is, in some sense, the question made visible. At approximately 10 o'clock, people began to leave. The program had ended, or at least the portion of the program that was watchable, because at 10 o'clock, NBC's television programming concluded for the evening, and the screen showed nothing but a test pattern, which is a geometric arrangement of shapes and lines used to calibrate the television signal, and which functions, when there is no other content, as the television's way of saying, "That's all for now, we will return." People put on their coats and said their thank yous and filed out of the Kozlowskis' apartment in the specific procession of people who have shared an experience and are now returning to their separate lives. In the hallway, going down the stairs, I listened to what they said about it. Mrs. Petrova said, "It is interesting. I wonder if my sister has seen it." Her sister is in Budapest. Her sister has almost certainly not seen it. The man whose name I hadn't caught said, "You can get one for about $400. I've been thinking about it." $400 is approximately 8 months' rent for my apartment. This information recontextualized the evening somewhat. The woman from the third floor said, "I think the children will like it. Stanislav seems to love it." Stanislav, who was directly behind her on the stairs, said, "I don't love it. I just watch it." Which is, I thought, the most sophisticated thing anyone said about television that evening. That was Tuesday. This is Friday. I have had 3 days to think about the television, which is the appropriate amount of time for something that deserves thought. Less than 3 days and you are still inside the immediate impression. More than 3 days and you start to forget the texture of it. 3 days is right. Here is what I think, after 3 days. The television is real. I say this as a specific claim, not as a tautology. When I say real, I mean it works. Not works as in the technology functions. I never doubted that. Works as in it does the thing it is trying to do. It transmits moving images with sound into living rooms. It creates, in those living rooms, a form of collective experience that is distinct from other forms of collective experience. 8 people who live in the same building laughed at the same moment in someone's living room on a Tuesday evening in November. That is real. The question I've been sitting with for 3 days is not whether the television works. The question is what it's going to do with its working. Because every technology that works reshapes something. The printing press reshaped knowledge, who had access to it, what form it took, how it traveled. The photograph reshaped memory, what we chose to record, what we thought of as worth preserving, what we understood by evidence. The telephone reshaped conversation, the relationship between distance and intimacy, the sense of what it meant to be connected to someone. The television is going to reshape what? I have been trying to answer this for 3 days, and I keep arriving at the same answer, which is everything simultaneously, and also something I cannot yet name specifically. Let me try to be more precise. The television is, first and most obviously, changing the room. Not the Kozlowskis' room specifically, the room as a concept. The living room, which in its traditional configuration is organized around conversation, chairs and sofas arranged facing each other, or facing a hearth, or around a table. In any case, in a layout that prioritizes the direct exchange between people who are present. The Kozlowskis have rearranged their living room to face the television. This sounds small. It is not small. When you rearrange the room to face the screen, you change the default activity of the room. The default activity of a room arranged for conversation is talk to each other. The default activity of a room arranged for television is watch the screen together. Together is still there. I want to be clear about this. The 8 people in the Kozlowskis' living room were together in a meaningful sense. But the direction of their attention was the same, all of us facing the same point, rather than the variety of directions that a conversational arrangement allows, where your attention moves between different people, where the person across from you is as much the content as what's being discussed. I think about the theater. In the theater, we also all face the same direction. We also share an attention directed at a common object. But the theater is, by design and tradition, a specific occasion. You go to it, you choose it, you dress for it. The theater asks you to bring your full self to a dedicated experience. The television is in the living room. It is the living room. It asks for nothing in particular from you. Not your dress clothes, not your choice to be present at a specific time, not your full attention necessarily. It asks only that you be in the same room, which you already are, and that you turn toward it, which the arrangement of the furniture has already accommodated. This accessibility is the most interesting and most troubling thing about it. The theater is a special occasion. The film is a special occasion. You choose to go. You make an effort. You are aware that you are doing something. The television just is there. And I suspect, this is my 3-day conclusion, that the casual ubiquity of it is going to produce something different from what either theater or cinema produces. Something more embedded in ordinary life, something that doesn't announce itself as culture, but seeps into the daily experience in a way that formal culture cannot. This could be wonderful. I am not certain it will be only wonderful. Milton Berle's comedy, which is the comedy I watched for most of Tuesday evening, is a specific type. It is vaudeville comedy. I want to explain what I mean by this, because vaudeville is becoming a historical term. Vaudeville as a live performance format is largely dead, a casualty of radio and cinema. And so describing Burl's comedy as vaudeville requires some unpacking. Vaudeville was built for audiences of thousands, in theaters where the person in the back row needed to be reached as thoroughly as the person in the front. It was large gestures, large expressions, large voices, large jokes. It was immediate, designed to produce a reaction, laughter, surprise, delight, within seconds of delivery, because the audience was restless and numerous, and you could lose them quickly. It was accessible. It did not require prior knowledge. It did not accumulate across an evening. Each bit was its own contained thing. Burl on television does all of this, and it works. I saw it work. I saw 8 people laugh repeatedly and genuinely, which is the only real metric that matters for comedy. But I found myself thinking, watching it, is this the only thing television can do? Because the qualities that make vaudeville-style comedy work on television, immediacy, accessibility, largeness, are not the only qualities that exist in comedy or in human expression generally. There are kinds of comedy that require patience, comedy that builds, that accumulates, that asks you to hold something in mind across a longer duration before the release comes. There are kinds of drama that require silence, moments that depend on what is not said, on the pause, on the air between words that theater achieves and radio achieves in its own way, and that I am not yet certain television can accommodate. Can television be quiet? Can television be slow? Can television be the kind of thing where nothing much happens for a few minutes, and you are in the presence of a person thinking, which is, for me at least, among the most riveting things a performance can offer? I don't know. What I know is that Tuesday evening was Milton Berle in a dress, and the laugh of 8 people in a living room at the same moment. That's real. The question is whether it's all of what television can be. Here is what I think will happen. Television will grow. The technology will improve. The screens will get larger, the image clearer, the content more varied. More families will have sets. The arrangement of rooms around screens will become standard rather than exceptional. I do not think television will replace cinema. Cinema has something that television cannot replicate in a living room: scale and darkness, and the specific social contract of the audience gathered specifically for the experience. The cinema asks you to leave your home and be somewhere with others, and that asking is part of the experience. The television is already in your home and asks nothing of the sort. I do not think television will replace radio. Radio is intimate in a different way. It is sound without image, which requires the specific imaginative participation that Mrs. Petrova's question addresses. Radio is also portable. You can listen while doing other things, while cooking, while walking, while working. The television, at least in its current form, asks for your full physical presence in front of it. I think television will become something of its own, not the replacement of other things, but a new category of experience with its own pleasures and its own limitations. Whether we will be wiser or less wise for having it, I genuinely cannot say. Whether it will enlarge what we understand about each other, or whether it will be primarily a delivery mechanism for advertisements, or whether it will be both, and if both, in what proportion, I cannot say either. What I can say is, it is here and it is real. And 8 people in a living room on a Tuesday night in November laughed together at something that happened on a 7-inch screen. And that moment of collective laughter was not nothing. It was, in fact, quite a lot. The question is only, what kind of lot? When I left on Tuesday night, when I put on my coat and said my thank yous and went down the stairs to my apartment, I did not tell the Kozlowskis what I had been thinking for 2.5 hours. I said what people say. What a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for including me. It's extraordinary. All of these were true. None of them were the full truth. The full truth is what I've been telling you for the last 40 minutes, over increasingly cold coffee at this corner table. And it is not the kind of thing you say to someone who has just given you an evening in their home and asked nothing of you but your presence. The Kozlowskis love their television. They are right to love it. It has given them evenings like Tuesday, in which their neighbors came up and sat together and laughed together. And that is a genuine gift. The technology that enables the gift is secondary to the gift itself. But I am the person who watches people watching things. And what I watch, I cannot simply stop watching in order to be polite. So I said, "It's extraordinary," and came home, and have been thinking about it for 3 days, and now I have told you. I have one more thing to say. The Kozlowskis' son Stanislav, the 17-year-old with the detachment of someone who has already absorbed something that the adults around him are still adjusting to, said, "I don't love it, I just watch it." That might be the most important sentence anyone says about any technology. Not the people who love it, not the people who fear it, the people who just watch it. Because the people who just watch it are the ones for whom it has become ordinary. And the things that become ordinary are the things that shape us without our noticing. Because the things we notice, we can think about and respond to and choose our relationship with. The things we just do without noticing, those are the ones that do something to us. I noticed the television. I am glad I noticed. I am also glad that Stanislav told me I looked like I was thinking too hard. Both things can be true. Come back for the next episode. I flew in an airplane. I will tell you what New York looks like from the air, and what it means to be in a place that is not a place, and then be somewhere new. And I will tell you about the moment, somewhere over Connecticut, when I understood for the first time what the word speed actually meant as a physical experience, rather than an abstract concept. Come back. It was worth it.